In the gleaming world of private aviation, where wealth meets the sky, a single broken jet was about to change two lives forever. Sarah Mitchell, the brilliant billionaire CEO of Pacific Aerospace, stood in her climate-controlled hangar, watching. Yet another expert failed to fix her grounded Gulfstream. That's when James Harrison walked in. Combat veteran turned local handyman, his calloused hands and quiet confidence speaking of a life lived in service rather than luxury. Within hours, he did what million-dollar engineers couldn't. He found the problem and fixed it. But it wasn't his technical skill that caught Sarah's eye. It was the dignified way he carried his struggles, never letting hardship dim his spirit. What could a billionaire and a veteran possibly have in common that would change both their lives forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. James Harrison's weathered hands moved methodically through his leather toolbox, each tool finding its familiar place with practiced precision. 20 years of aircraft maintenance in the Air Force had ingrained in him a discipline that even civilian life couldn't erode. The toolbox itself was a testament to his journey, scratched and worn, but meticulously maintained, much like the man himself. The morning sun filtered through the small window of his modest rental house, casting long shadows across the kitchen table where bills lay scattered like fallen leaves. His daughter Katie's college tuition statement sat at the top of the pile, the numbers seeming to grow larger every time he looked at them. She was in her second year at State, studying aerospace engineering, a path that filled him with both pride and anxiety. "You've got this, old man," he muttered, checking his phone for today's maintenance jobs. The screen displayed 3 pending requests: a broken furnace at the Wilson place, Mrs. Henderson's flickering porch light, and now this unexpected call about a private jet at Pacific Aerospace. The pay would barely cover this month's expenses, but it was better than nothing. His reflection in the hallway mirror caught his eye as he gathered his things. At 52, his dark hair had given way to distinguished silver at the temples, and lines of experience marked his face. But his posture remained military straight, his blue eyes sharp and alert. The same eyes that had scrutinized countless aircraft systems now examined leaky pipes and faulty circuits, a far cry from the cutting-edge military aircraft he once maintained. The transition to civilian life hadn't been easy. After retiring from the Air Force, James had discovered that 2 decades of military aerospace expertise didn't translate neatly into civilian credentials. The certificates and qualifications that had made him responsible for multi-million-dollar aircraft were suddenly insufficient for even entry-level positions at commercial airlines. He picked up the framed photo on the side table. Katie's high school graduation. She stood beaming in her blue gown, her arm around his shoulders, both of them smiling despite the fresh grief of losing Sarah, his wife, just months before to cancer. The medical bills had drained their savings, but Katie's smile that day had made everything worth it. His phone buzzed, a text from Katie. "Good luck today, Dad. Love you." A warm smile crossed his face as he typed back a quick reply. She worried about him, he knew, even as she juggled her own studies and part-time job. The role reversal wasn't lost on him, the protector now being protected. The toolbox felt heavier than usual as he loaded it into his old Ford pickup. The truck, like everything else in his life, was maintained with careful attention despite its age. The engine turned over smoothly, the result of countless hours of weekend maintenance, and James pulled out of his driveway into the crisp morning air. The drive to Pacific Aerospace gave him time to think. He'd heard about the company, of course. Everyone in town had. Their sprawling facility represented everything the local economy aspired to be: innovative, prosperous, future-focused. The thought of working on one of their aircraft stirred something in him, a familiar excitement he hadn't felt in years. His mind drifted back to his Air Force days, to the satisfaction of solving complex mechanical puzzles, to the responsibility of ensuring that every system was perfect before each flight. Those skills hadn't disappeared. They'd just been redirected to smaller, humbler tasks. Yet each job, no matter how minor, received the same meticulous attention he'd once given to military aircraft. His old sergeant's words still rang in his ears. "Excellence isn't about what you're working on, Harrison. It's about who you are." As the Pacific Aerospace complex came into view, its modern architecture gleaming in the morning light, James felt a familiar calm settle over him. Whatever problem awaited him inside that hangar, he would approach it the same way he had approached every challenge in his life, with patience, precision, and quiet determination. The guard at the gate checked his ID, and as James drove through, he couldn't shake the feeling that today might be different from the usual repair calls. He parked his truck in the visitors section, grabbed his toolbox, and walked toward the hangar entrance. The contrast between his worn work clothes and the pristine corporate environment wasn't lost on him, but years of service had taught him that true worth lay in capability, not appearance. With that thought, he stepped into the climate-controlled hangar, unaware that his life was about to change forever. Sarah Mitchell stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her top-floor office, her tablet displaying the latest engineering schematics for Pacific Aerospace's newest project. At 48, she had built an empire from the ground up, transforming a struggling regional aircraft maintenance company into a global leader in aerospace innovation. The view before her, sprawling hangars, test facilities, and research centers, was a testament to 15 years of relentless determination. Her reflection in the glass caught her attention, elegant in a tailored charcoal suit, auburn hair styled simply but precisely, green eyes focused and sharp. The media loved to call her the Ice Queen of Aviation, a nickname that amused and irritated her in equal measure. They saw the polished exterior, the confident CEO, but missed the engineer who still loved nothing more than solving complex mechanical problems. "Ms. Mitchell," her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board meeting starts in 5 minutes, and Mr. Davidson is already asking about the grounded Gulfstream situation." Sarah suppressed a sigh. Richard Davidson, lead board member and perpetual thorn in her side, had never quite accepted that. The former shop girl, who once cleaned aircraft parts, had risen to become his boss. "Tell them I'll be right there," she responded, gathering her materials. The tablet in her hands held her private passion. Detailed technical drawings and diagnostic procedures she still worked on late into the night. While other CEOs delegated everything technical, Sarah had never lost her love for the hands-on aspects of aerospace engineering. It was her secret advantage, the foundation of her success, and the reason Pacific Aerospace's innovations consistently led the industry. Walking through the executive floor, she passed the wall of achievements that chronicled her journey. Her first patent at 25, a revolutionary improvement in jet engine efficiency, the acquisition of struggling Pacific Airways, the transformation into Pacific Aerospace. Each milestone represented countless hours of work, sacrificed relationships, and lonely victories celebrated in empty offices. The boardroom fell silent as she entered, 12 pairs of eyes following her movement to the head of the table. Sarah had long ago learned to wear their scrutiny like armor. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had become her trademark, "I understand there are concerns about the Gulfstream situation." "Concerns is putting it mildly," Davidson interjected, his silver hair and expensive suit failing to disguise his agitation. "That aircraft represents a $50 million investment, and it's been grounded for 3 days. Our top engineers can't identify the problem, and our reputation is at stake." Sarah maintained her composed expression, though frustration simmered beneath the surface. The Gulfstream G650 had been experiencing mysterious system failures that defied conventional diagnosis. 5 senior engineers had failed to identify the root cause, and their highest-profile client was growing impatient. "We have another specialist coming in this morning," she replied, careful to keep her tone neutral. She didn't mention that this specialist was a local handyman. Davidson would have an aneurysm at the mere suggestion. The meeting dragged on, discussion moving to quarterly projections and market expansion plans. Sarah contributed where necessary, but part of her mind remained in the hangar with the troubled aircraft. In her gut, she felt the solution was something obvious that everyone was overlooking, something that fresh eyes might see. Later, alone, in her office, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. The photo on her desk showed a younger version of herself with her father, standing proudly beside the small aircraft repair shop where she'd grown up. He taught her everything about aircraft maintenance, encouraged her engineering studies, and supported her dreams until cancer took him just as her career was taking off. "I could use your insight right now, Dad," she murmured, touching the frame gently. He would have loved this puzzle, would have approached it with the same methodical patience he'd applied to every repair job, no matter how small. The intercom buzzed again. "Ms. Mitchell, the maintenance specialist has arrived at Hangar 3. "Thank you, Claire. I'll head down shortly." Sarah gathered her tablet and pulled up the aircraft's maintenance logs. Something told her she should witness this inspection personally, though she couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was intuition, or perhaps just desperation for a fresh perspective. As she rode the private elevator down to the hangar level, Sarah reflected on the loneliness of her position. Trust had become a luxury she could rarely afford. Too many people saw her only as a stepping stone or a trophy to be won. Her success had built walls that kept out not just the opportunists, but also any chance of genuine connection. The hangar. Doors slid open before her, and she stepped into the climate-controlled space that housed the troubled Gulfstream. From the shadows of the observation area, she would watch this new specialist work, hoping against hope that today might bring a solution, unaware that she was about to witness not just a repair, but a moment that would challenge everything. She thought she knew about trust, connection, and the walls she'd built around her heart. The Gulfstream G650 dominated the hangar space, its sleek form a study in aerodynamic perfection. James stood before it, taking in the aircraft with an expert's eye, while the maintenance supervisor, a young man named Tom Chen, flipped through a thick stack of diagnostic reports. 3 days of testing, 5 senior engineers, and still no solution, Tom explained, frustration evident in his voice. "The system checks show everything's normal, but when we power up, we get cascading failures across multiple subsystems. It's like chasing a ghost," James nodded, his eyes already tracking the aircraft's lines. "Mind if I see the maintenance log?" Tom handed over a tablet containing months of detailed records. James's weathered fingers moved across the screen with surprising dexterity, his expression growing more focused as he scrolled through the entries. From her hidden vantage point in the observation area, Sarah watched his methodical review with growing interest. "When did the problems first appear?" James asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd asked such questions thousands of times before. "Last Thursday. Everything was fine during the morning check, but during pre-flight, the pilot reported system inconsistencies. We've been grounded since then." James set the tablet down and approached the aircraft, running his hand along its fuselage with almost reverent attention. "These newer models," he mused, "they're incredible machines, but sometimes all those sophisticated systems can mask a simple problem." He reached for his toolbox. "Mind if I take a look underneath?" Sarah leaned forward slightly, intrigued by his approach. The other engineers had immediately dived into the computer diagnostics, but this man was starting with the basics, just as her father would have done. For the next hour, James worked in near silence, methodically checking systems and connections. His movements were efficient but unhurried, each inspection thorough and purposeful. Occasionally, he would make notes in a worn leather notebook he pulled from his pocket, his handwriting neat and precise. Sir, Tom ventured after watching James work. Our diagnostic equipment, sometimes, James interrupted gently, too much equipment can blind us to what's right in front of us. He pointed to a seemingly innocent section of the fuselage. See this area here? The skin temperature's slightly different. Might not show up on instruments, but you can feel it. Sarah found herself holding her breath. She'd seen countless engineers work on aircraft, but there was something different about this man's approach. A combination of old-school craftsmanship and deep technical understanding that reminded her powerfully of her father. James continued his examination, working his way through the aircraft systems with patient determination. His questions to Tom were few but precise, each one revealing a deep understanding of aircraft systems that seemed at odds with his current role as a local handyman. 3 hours into the inspection, James straightened up from where he'd been examining a section of the auxiliary power unit. I think I've found your ghost, he said quietly. Tom looked skeptical. Really? Where? It's not where everyone's been looking, James explained, moving to the aircraft's tail section. The computer systems are working fine. The problem is physical, a microscopic stress fracture in the APU housing that's causing intermittent electrical grounding issues. Under normal conditions, it's invisible. But when the system's under load, he walked Tom through his reasoning, pointing out the subtle signs he'd noticed. Sarah found herself nodding along with his explanation. It made perfect sense, yet was so easily overlooked in an age of digital diagnostics. The good news is, James continued, it's relatively simple to fix. The housing needs to be replaced, but I can do a temporary repair that will get you through the next few days until the new part arrives. Tom stared at him in disbelief. You're sure about this? 20 years of keeping aircraft flying in every condition imaginable teaches you to trust your instincts, James replied with a slight smile. But don't take my word for it. Let me make the repair, and you can run every test you want. Sarah had heard enough. She stepped out of the shadows, her heels clicking on the hangar floor as she approached. James turned at the sound, and their eyes met for the first time. In that moment, something passed between them, a mutual recognition of kindred spirits, who understood that true expertise was about more than fancy equipment and advanced degrees. Mr. Harrison, she said, extending her hand. I'm Sarah Mitchell. I believe you've just solved a problem that's been keeping my entire engineering team up at night. James's handshake was firm but not aggressive, his calloused palm a stark contrast to her manicured hand. Ma'am, he replied simply, but his eyes held a quiet confidence that needed no elaboration. Show me exactly what you found, she requested. And for the next 30 minutes, James walked her through his diagnosis, explaining each step of his reasoning. Sarah asked detailed technical questions that revealed her own deep understanding of aircraft systems, and James responded with equally sophisticated answers, their conversation falling into the comfortable rhythm of two experts speaking the same language. By the end of the day, James's temporary repair had been completed and verified. The Gulfstream systems performed flawlessly through every test, vindicating his diagnosis. As the hangar crew celebrated their success, Sarah watched James quietly pack his tools, his movements containing the same careful precision he'd shown throughout the day. She had made her decision long before he closed his toolbox. This man possessed something her company desperately needed, not just technical skill, but the kind of deep, intuitive understanding of aircraft that couldn't be taught in any classroom. She wasn't about to let him walk away to fix more leaky faucets and flickering porch lights. The following morning found James back at Pacific Aerospace, this time working alongside the engineering team to implement his temporary repair solution. The atmosphere in the hangar had shifted noticeably, the previous day's skepticism replaced by cautious respect as he methodically demonstrated his approach. Sarah observed from her usual spot in the hangar, but today she made no attempt to remain hidden. Her tablet displayed James's handwritten diagnostic notes, which she'd had digitized overnight. Their elegant simplicity struck her, each observation precise, each deduction logical. It was a stark contrast to the convoluted computer analyses that had failed to identify the problem. "The key," James explained to the gathered engineers, his voice carrying naturally across the hangar, "is understanding that modern aircraft are still fundamentally mechanical beings. All these digital systems, they're wonderful tools, but they're not magic. They can only tell you what they're programmed to see." He ran his hand along the repaired APU housing, his touch almost diagnostic in its sensitivity. "Sometimes you need to listen to what the aircraft is telling you, not just what the computers say it's saying." Sarah found herself nodding, remembering similar words from her father. She watched as James worked with the team, noting how he shared his knowledge without condescension, teaching through demonstration rather than lecture. The younger engineers, initially standoffish, began to gravitate toward him, drawn by his quiet expertise. "It's not just about fixing the immediate problem," he continued, showing them the subtle signs he'd noticed. "It's about understanding why it happened and what it might tell you about other potential issues." His weathered notebook came out. Again, each page revealing careful observations and insights that had nothing to do with computer diagnostics. The morning progressed, and with each passing hour, Sarah's initial impression solidified. James Harrison wasn't just a skilled mechanic, he was a master of his craft, someone who understood aircraft at an almost intuitive level. The kind of expertise that couldn't be replicated by artificial intelligence or replaced by newer technology. During a brief break, she approached him as he sat reviewing system data on a laptop. "Your approach reminds me of someone," she said, settling into the chair beside him. "My father. He always said that machines speak their own language, if you know how to listen." James looked up, surprise flickering across his features at her. Unexpected openness. "Wise man," he replied. "In the Air Force, we had all the latest diagnostic equipment, but the best mechanics were always the ones who could feel when something wasn't right, even if the computer said everything was fine." 20 years of service, Sarah mused, studying his profile. "Why aren't you working for one of the major airlines?" A shadow crossed his face. "Military certifications don't translate well to civilian requirements. By the time my wife got sick, retraining wasn't really an option." He paused, then added quietly, "Sometimes life chooses your path for you." Sarah absorbed this information, feeling an unexpected connection to his loss. "My father didn't live to see Pacific Aerospace become what it is today," she shared. "Cancer. He taught me everything I know about aircraft maintenance, but he never saw me become CEO." Their eyes met, a moment of shared understanding passing between them. Here were two people who understood loss, who knew what it meant to carry on despite it. The moment stretched, comfortable rather than awkward, until a question from one of the engineers drew James's attention back to the repair work. Sarah watched him return to the task, her mind already forming plans. The problem wasn't just the Gulfstream, it was the growing gap between old-school expertise and modern technology. James Harrison represented a bridge between these worlds, someone who could teach her younger engineers the things that couldn't be learned from manuals and computer screens. As the day progressed, she observed how he documented every step of the repair process, creating a detailed record that combined technical precision with practical insights. His notebook, she realized, was more than just a repair log. It was a teaching tool, filled with the kind of real-world knowledge that could only come from decades of hands-on experience. By late afternoon, the repair was complete. The Gulfstream's systems performed flawlessly through every test scenario, each successful run further validating James's diagnosis. The engineering team's initial skepticism had transformed into genuine respect, and even Tom Chen was taking notes on James's methodology. Sarah stood at the hangar entrance as James packed up his tools for the day. The setting sun cast long shadows across the concrete floor, and in that moment she saw him not as a handyman or even a veteran, but as someone who embodied the very qualities that had built Pacific Aerospace: expertise, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. She had already decided to offer him a position, but watching him work today had shown her something more. This wasn't just about fixing aircraft. It was about preserving a kind of knowledge that was becoming increasingly rare in the age of digital diagnostics. James Harrison might have come to fix a broken jet, but he had the potential to fix something far more valuable: the growing disconnect between experience and innovation that threatened the future of aviation maintenance. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through Sarah's office windows as she reviewed the contract one final time. The terms were generous: head of fleet maintenance, comprehensive benefits, company housing, and a salary that would ensure Katie's and college education would no longer be a source of anxiety. She placed the document in a leather portfolio, her fingertips lingering on the embossed Pacific Aerospace logo. "Send Mr. Harrison up, please," she spoke into the intercom. While waiting, she found herself straightening items on her desk. An uncharacteristic display of nervous energy. This meeting felt different from the countless executive negotiations she'd conducted over the years. James entered precisely at the appointed time, still in his work clothes, but freshly cleaned up. He carried himself with the same quiet dignity she'd observed in the hangar, seemingly unfazed by the opulent surroundings of the executive floor. "Please sit down." Sarah gestured to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. "Would you like some coffee?" "Thank you, ma'am," he replied, accepting the offer with a slight nod. She noticed how he held the fine china cup with the same careful precision he'd shown while handling aircraft components. "Mr. Harrison, James," she began testing the informal address. "I'll be direct. What you demonstrated yesterday and today wasn't just technical expertise. It was something we're increasingly losing in this industry: the ability to understand aircraft on an intuitive level, to see beyond digital readouts and computer diagnostics." James sat quietly, his blue eyes steady as she continued. "I'm offering you a position as head of fleet maintenance for Pacific Aerospace. Full benefits, relocation assistance, and—" She slid the portfolio across the desk. "A salary commensurate with your expertise." He opened the portfolio and she watched his expression carefully as he reviewed the terms. A slight widening of his eyes was the only indication of his surprise at the figures. "This is generous," he said finally, looking up. "But Ms. Mitchell—" "Sarah, please." "Sarah," he amended. "I don't have the civilian certifications that position would require. Your board—" "Will have to trust my judgment," she interrupted firmly. "We can arrange for any necessary certifications. What I can't certify is 20 years of hands-on experience and the kind of intuitive understanding you possess. That's what we need here." James set the portfolio down carefully. "May I ask why? There must be dozens of qualified candidates with the right paperwork." Sarah stood and walked to the window, gathering her thoughts. "When I was growing up, my father ran a small aircraft repair shop. He taught me that maintaining aircraft was about more than following manuals. It was about developing a relationship with the machines, understanding their language." She turned back to face him. "Yesterday, I watched you speak that same language. Oh, younger engineers are brilliant with computers, but they're losing touch with the physical reality of aircraft maintenance." She returned to her desk, sitting down again. "I'm not just offering you a job, James. I'm asking you to help bridge that gap, to teach our team what can't be learned from screens and simulations." James was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "My daughter," he said finally. "She's in college, studying aerospace engineering. This would mean moving, changing her life too." "There's an excellent engineering internship program here," Sarah replied, having anticipated this concern. "And the company housing is close to State University's satellite campus. She could transfer without losing any credits." She watched as James processed this information, seeing the wheels turn behind his careful expression. The mention of his daughter had softened something in his demeanor. It's a lot to consider, he said finally. This would be a significant change, not just for me, but for Katie too. Could I have some time to discuss it with her? Of course, Sarah nodded, respecting his priorities. Take the weekend to think it over. Talk with Katie. The position will be waiting on Monday morning if you want it. James stood, holding the portfolio close. Thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity and for understanding about Katie. Not everyone in your position would. Their eyes met, and Sarah felt that same connection from earlier, a mutual recognition of shared values despite their different backgrounds. Being CEO doesn't mean I've forgotten what matters most, she said softly. Family should always come first. As James turned to leave, she added, and James, whatever you decide, thank you for reminding me what real expertise looks like. My father would have approved of your work today. He paused at the door, a small smile touching his features. Your father taught you well, Sarah. It shows in how you run this company. With that, he left, leaving Sarah to wonder why his opinion suddenly meant so much to her. Standing at her window, watching James cross the parking lot to his truck, Sarah realized something had shifted in her carefully ordered world. In trying to solve a technical problem, she might have found something she didn't even know she was looking for. Someone who understood not just the language of machines, but the value of integrity, family, and genuine expertise. The sun was setting over the hangars, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Sarah touched the window glass lightly, her reflection overlaying the scene below. "What do you think, Dad?" she whispered. "Did I make the right call?" The answering silence felt somehow approving. Monday morning arrived with the promise of new beginnings. James stood in the empty living room of his company-provided house, surrounded by moving boxes and the early morning light streaming through uncurtained windows. The space was larger than his old rental, with 3 bedrooms and a modern kitchen that Katie had already claimed as her study spot during her weekend visit. His fingers traced the set of keys on the granite kitchen counter. House keys, office keys, hangar access, cards. Each one represented a level of trust he hadn't expected to find again in civilian life. Katie's excited voice still echoed in his memory from their weekend discussion. "Dad, this is exactly what you've been waiting for." The doorbell interrupted his thoughts. Opening the door, he found Sarah Mitchell standing on his porch, dressed more casually than he'd seen her before, in dark slacks and a blue blazer. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, holding up 2 coffee cups. "I thought you might need this before diving into your first day." James accepted the offered coffee with a smile, noting how different she seemed outside the formal office setting. "Thank you. Would you like to come in? It's still a bit bare, but the view's nice." Sarah followed him into the kitchen, her eyes taking in the space. "How's Katie feeling about the move?" "Excited," James replied, leaning against the counter. "She's already planning to apply for the summer internship program. The transfer to the satellite campus went through smoothly. Thank you for helping with that." "Of course." Sarah sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim of her cup. "And you? Having any second thoughts?" James considered the question carefully. "No," he said finally. "It feels right, like finding an old flight path again after being grounded for too long." Sarah nodded, understanding the aviation metaphor perfectly. "Your team's waiting in Hangar 4. I thought you might want to walk over together, get oriented before the morning briefing." The walk to the hangar complex took them through the heart of Pacific Aerospace's facility. Early morning sunshine glinted off aircraft bodies in various stages of maintenance, and the air hummed with the sound of equipment coming to life. James absorbed every detail, his military-trained eyes noting safety procedures, workflow patterns, and potential areas for improvement. "Your predecessor was more of an administrator than a hands-on leader," Sarah explained as they walked. "The team's solid, but they've been missing that connection between theory and practical experience. Some of them have never worked on an aircraft without a computer telling them what to do." James nodded, understanding the challenge ahead. It'll take time to change that mindset. We'll need to start with the basics, build their confidence in their own judgment. They reached Hangar 4, where a group of engineers was already gathered. Tom Chen stepped forward, now James's second in command, looking both excited and slightly nervous. "Team," Sarah addressed the group, her voice carrying naturally in the large space. "Meet James Harrison, your new head of fleet maintenance. Some of you saw his work last week with the Gulfstream. That's the kind of expertise I expect you to learn from him." James stepped forward, taking in the mixture of curious and skeptical faces before him. He recognized the look. He'd worn it himself as a young airman before understanding that true expertise went beyond technical specifications. "Morning, everyone," he began, his voice steady and confident. "Before we dive into the day's tasks, I'd like to see each of you work. Not your computers, you. Show me how you inspect an aircraft, how you diagnose problems, how you think about maintenance. Today's about learning where we are so we can figure out where we're going." The tension in the room eased slightly. One young engineer raised her hand. "Sir, what about the scheduled diagnostics runs?" "We'll get to those," James assured her. "But first, I want to see how you read an aircraft without them." He turned to Sarah, who had been watching the interaction with approval. "With your permission, Miss Mitchell." "They're all yours, Mr. Harrison," she replied, a small smile playing at her lips. "I look forward to seeing the results." As Sarah left the hangar, James began organizing the team into groups, already planning how to bridge the gap between their technical knowledge and practical experience. He caught glimpses of her throughout the day, watching from various vantage points as he worked with the engineers, her presence both professional and somehow personal. By day's end, James had assessed each team member's strengths and weaknesses, begun developing training plans, and even discovered a few promising talents who showed natural intuition for aircraft systems. He sat in his new office, a practical space overlooking the main hangar floor, reviewing his notes when Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Successful first day?" she asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "Getting there," he replied. "Good team, just needs some redirection. Like aircraft, sometimes people just need someone to help them find their way back to basics." Sarah nodded, understanding the parallel. "Welcome home, James," she said softly, before turning to leave. The words hung in the air behind her, carrying a weight that went beyond their professional relationship. Looking out over the hangar floor, watching the evening shift begin their work, James felt something he hadn't experienced since leaving the Air Force. A sense of belonging, of purpose, restored. Katie had been right. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to rebuild something he thought he'd lost forever. The photograph slipped from James's wallet as he reached for his ID card, floating to the hangar floor like an autumn leaf. It was an old picture, worn at the edges. James in his Air Force uniform, his wife Susan in her favorite blue dress, and a young Katie between them, missing her front teeth in a wide smile. The day he'd received his Master Technical Sergeant's stripes. He bent to retrieve it, but another hand reached it first. Sarah stood there, holding the photo with unexpected gentleness, her eyes taking in the captured moment of happiness. "Your wife?" she asked softly, handing the picture back. James nodded, carefully returning the photo to his wallet. "Susan. That was about 8 years ago, before..." He trailed off, the familiar ache rising in his chest. "Cancer," Sarah said. Not a question, but a statement of understanding. "Like my father." She paused, then added, "Would you join me for coffee? I could use a break from budget meetings." They found themselves in Sarah's private office minutes later, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cityscape beyond her windows. 2 cups of coffee sat between them, the informal setting a stark contrast to their first meeting in this same room. "Katie has her smile," Sarah observed, referring to the photo. "And your determination." "Susan's determination, actually," James corrected with a soft chuckle. "She was the strong one. When she got sick, she made me promise to keep Katie's dreams alive, no matter what." Even sold her grandmother's jewelry to start Katie's college fund. Sarah's expression softened. My father did something similar. Sold his beloved restored Cessna to pay for my engineering degree. Said dreams were worth more than machines. She traced the rim of her coffee cup thoughtfully. I never told anyone that before. It's not the kind of thing most people understand, James replied. The sacrifices parents make, the weight of those promises. No, they don't. Sarah stood, walking to a small side table where a single-framed photo stood. She brought it back to her desk. This was my father's repair shop, where I learned everything that really matters about aircraft maintenance. James studied the image. A younger Sarah in overalls covered in grease, beaming beside a proud-looking man in front of a modest workshop. The joy in their expressions was palpable. He taught you well, James observed. It shows in how you run this place, the attention to detail, the emphasis on doing things right. Sometimes I wonder if he'd recognize it now, Sarah admitted. All this technology, these computers, we've come so far from that little shop. He'd be proud, James said with quiet certainty, because you haven't forgotten the fundamentals. You still understand that it's about more than just machines. Their eyes met over the desk, and something shifted in the air between them. Here were two people who understood loss, who carried the weight of promises made to loved ones now gone. Katie's planning to visit this weekend, James said after a moment. She wants to see the facility, maybe meet some of the engineering team. I'd like to meet her, Sarah replied, then added with a small smile, if that's appropriate. I think she'd like that. She's already reading about your work in sustainable aviation technology. The conversation drifted to lighter topics: Katie's studies, the progress of the maintenance team, the challenges of modernizing without losing touch with traditional skills. As they talked, both felt the ease of connection that comes from shared experiences and understanding. The setting sun painted the office in amber hues when James finally stood to leave. Thank you for the coffee, he said, and for understanding about the photo. Thank you for sharing it, Sarah replied. It's nice, having someone who understands. As James walked back to his office, he realized he felt lighter somehow, as if sharing the weight of his memories had made them easier to carry. In his wallet, Susan's smile seemed to hold a different kind of warmth now, less painful, more like a blessing. Sarah remained at her desk long after James left, looking at the photo of her father's shop. She thought about promises kept, about the unexpected ways life brought people together, and about how sharing grief could sometimes open the door to healing. The next morning, when they passed each other in the hangar, their usual professional nods carried an extra layer of understanding. They had shared something precious, not just memories of loss, but the recognition that moving forward didn't mean leaving those memories behind. In the weeks that followed, their coffee breaks became a quiet ritual, moments of shared understanding. In the midst of their busy days, sometimes they talked about work, sometimes about their pasts, and sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, watching the aircraft below and feeling the presence of those they'd lost, not as a burden now, but as a bridge connecting their two worlds. The quarterly board meeting room crackled with tension. Richard Davidson stood at the head of the table, a stack of papers placed precisely before him, his silver hair catching the morning light. Ms. Mitchell, he began, his tone carefully measured. Perhaps you can explain why our head of fleet maintenance lacks the standard industry certifications required by our own corporate bylaws. Sarah sat straight-backed in her chair, her expression neutral. Mr. Harrison's military experience, Davidson interrupted, while admirable, is not equivalent to civilian certification. This isn't some small-town repair. Shop, Sarah. We're a publicly traded company with shareholders to answer to. The meeting minutes lay open on the polished table, recording every word of this confrontation. Sarah could feel the other board members watching, waiting to see how she would handle this challenge to her authority. If you'll review page 37 of the quarterly report, she replied, her voice steady. "You'll see that maintenance efficiency has increased 28% since Mr. Harrison joined us. Aircraft turnaround times are down, and our safety ratings have never been higher." Davidson waved dismissively at the numbers. "Statistics can be manipulated. The fact remains that we've placed an uncertified individual in charge of our entire maintenance operation. The liability implications alone are fully covered," Sarah cut in. "Our legal team has reviewed his qualifications extensively. Furthermore, Mr. Harrison is currently enrolled in our certification program, though his practical expertise already exceeds the requirements." Another board member, Janet Chen, leaned forward. "I've been reviewing the maintenance logs personally," she interjected. "The improvement in documentation and training protocols is remarkable. Our junior engineers are showing significantly better hands-on diagnostic skills." Davidson's jaw tightened. "That's hardly the point." "Actually," Sarah interrupted, standing, to address the room, "that's exactly the point. When I promoted James Harrison, I wasn't just filling a position, I was investing in the future of our maintenance program." She moved to the wall display, bringing up a series of training metrics. "Look at these numbers. Our younger engineers are learning skills that no computer simulation can teach. They're developing the kind of intuitive understanding that prevents accidents before they happen." She turned to face Davidson directly. "You're right about one thing, Richard. This isn't a small-town repair shop. It's a company that leads the industry because we recognize real expertise when we see it, regardless of what papers accompany it." Down in Hangar 4, unaware of the boardroom drama, James was conducting a training session with his team. He stood beside a partially disassembled engine, watching as Lisa Chen, one of his most promising young engineers, worked through a diagnostic sequence without referring to her tablet. "What's telling you there's a problem?" he asked, noting her focused expression. Lisa ran her hands along the component housing, just as he'd taught her. "The vibration pattern's wrong," she answered confidently. "And there's a temperature variance here that the sensors aren't picking up." She looked up at him. "The computer says it's within normal parameters, but—" James nodded approvingly. "Trust your instincts. They're trying to tell you something." The rest of the team gathered around, watching as Lisa completed her diagnosis. When she finally identified the microscopic crack in a supposedly normal component, the pride in her achievement was visible on every face. Back in the boardroom, Sarah was wrapping up her defense. "I've invited any board member to visit the maintenance facility personally. Watch Mr. Harrison work with our team. See the results for yourself. Our decision isn't whether to keep him. It's how quickly we can implement his training methods." Across all our facilities, Davidson sat back, his expression sour but resigned. Other board members were nodding, won over by the combination of hard data and Sarah's passionate advocacy. "We'll need documentation," he said finally. "Detailed records of his training protocols, certification progress reports, already in progress," Sarah replied smoothly. "Now, shall we move on to the next agenda item?" Later that afternoon, Sarah found James in his office, reviewing maintenance logs with the same careful attention he gave to aircraft systems. "The board meeting went well," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Though Davidson's not entirely convinced, James looked up, concern flickering across his features. "Should I be worried?" Sarah shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "No, just keep doing what you're doing. The results speak for themselves." "Thank you," he said quietly, "for fighting for me." "I'm fighting for what's right for this company," she replied. But they both knew it was more than that. "Though, I should warn you, Davidson wants to observe one of your training sessions." James's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Send him down during Lisa's next diagnostic run. She's doing things with aircraft systems that even the computers can't match now." Sarah nodded, understanding the strategy. Lisa Chen was Davidson's niece, though few in the company knew it. Seeing her growth under James's mentorship would be a powerful argument in their favor. As she turned to leave, Sarah paused at the door. "Coffee later? Wouldn't miss it, James replied, their daily ritual now a comfortable constant in both their lives. Walking back to her office, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in the months since James joined Pacific Aerospace. She'd taken a risk bringing him on, but somehow defending that decision felt like defending something much more personal, a reminder of her father's lessons about valuing true expertise over paperwork and about recognizing the rare people who could bridge the gap between old wisdom and new technology. The hangar was different at night. Overhead lights dimmed to their evening setting. The massive space took on an almost cathedral-like quality, with moonlight filtering through the high windows and casting silver paths across the polished floor. Sarah often found herself working late, drawn to the peaceful atmosphere that settled over the facility after hours. Tonight, she wasn't alone. The soft glow from James's office caught her attention as she walked through the hangar. Through the window, she could see him bent over his desk, examining something with intense concentration. She knocked softly on his doorframe. "You're here late." James looked up, not entirely surprised to see her. These evening encounters had become more frequent lately. "Just reviewing some of the old maintenance logs you found in storage. The history in these is fascinating." Sarah moved closer, peering at the yellowed pages spread across his desk. "Those are from my father's shop," she realized, recognizing the familiar handwriting. "Where did you find them?" "Archives sent them up when I was researching historical maintenance patterns," he explained, shifting to make room for her to see. "Your father's attention to detail was remarkable. Look at these notes about engine harmonics. He was identifying problems that modern sensors still struggle to detect." Sarah settled into the chair beside his desk, drawn into the familiar scrawl of her father's handwriting. "He used to say that every aircraft had its own voice. If you listened carefully enough, it would tell you exactly what was wrong." He was right, James agreed, turning a page carefully. "I've been incorporating some of his observation techniques into our training program. Teaching the team to use their senses first, instruments second. The security footage from their many late-night conversations would show them like this. Two figures bent over old logbooks, sharing insights and memories, their heads sometimes close together as they examined particularly interesting entries. Professional boundaries remained, but something else was growing in these quiet evening moments, a connection built on shared understanding and mutual respect. "Katie called today," James mentioned, as they took a break with coffee from the office. "Machine. She's excited about starting her internship here next month. Says she's been reading every technical manual she can find about our fleet." Sarah smiled, warming her hands around her cup. "Like father, like daughter. Though I hear she's more interested in design than maintenance. Takes after her mother there," James said softly. "Susan was always looking to the future, wanting to build new things. Katie has her vision." The mention of Susan didn't carry the same weight of sadness it once had. Time and understanding had transformed grief into gentle remembrance. Sarah noticed the change in James's voice when he spoke of his late wife now. The love remained, but the pain had softened. "Tell me about her," Sarah said, settling more comfortably in her chair. "Susan, what would she think of all this?" James was quiet for a moment, considering. "She'd be laughing," he finally said, a smile touching his eyes. "All those years I spent worried about civilian certifications, and here I am, teaching the next generation of engineers. She always said things would work out if I just trusted my path." Wise woman. "She was." James turned to face Sarah more directly. "What about your father? What would he make of Pacific Aerospace now?" Sarah's gaze drifted to the hangar floor. Below, where state-of-the-art aircraft stood in various stages of maintenance. "He'd love the technology, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think he'd be most proud of moments like this. People sharing knowledge, passing on the kind of understanding that can't be programmed into computers." Their eyes met in the quiet understanding that had become familiar during these late-night conversations. Both had carried the weight of loss, of promises made to loved ones now gone. But somehow, in finding each other, those promises felt lighter, shared between hearts that understood their importance. A distant rumble of thunder broke the moment. Rain began to patter against the hangar's high windows, creating a gentle backdrop to their conversation. "We should probably call it a night," James said, though neither made a move to leave. "Probably," Sarah agreed, but remained in her chair. Though there's something about this place at night. Reminds me of when Dad would let me stay late at the shop, learning about aircraft systems while the rest of the world slept." James nodded, understanding perfectly. "In the Air Force, I used to volunteer for night shift maintenance. There's a peace to it. Just you and the aircraft. No distractions." The rain continued its gentle rhythm as they sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had found in each other not just a colleague or a friend, but someone who truly understood the language of their hearts. The security cameras would record them there for another hour, sharing memories and insights, their professional relationship deepening into something neither had expected, but both were beginning to welcome. When they finally left the hangar that night, walking to their cars under shared umbrella, the air between them felt charged with possibility, not just for themselves, but for all they could accomplish together, bridging the gap between past wisdom and future innovation. The emergency alert pierced the pre-dawn quiet of Pacific Aerospace's headquarters. Sarah's phone buzzed urgently on her nightstand, displaying a critical system warning from one of their client's aircraft. A Gulfstream G650 carrying a medical transplant team, experiencing multiple system failures at 37,000 feet. She was already dialing James's number as she dressed, but he answered before the first ring completed. "I'm on my way," he said simply, understanding the gravity of the situation without explanation. The hangar was chaos when she arrived. Emergency lights cast harsh shadows across worried faces as engineers huddled around displays showing the aircraft's deteriorating status. James stood at the center of it all, a calm presence in the storm, as he coordinated with the flight crew via satellite link. "Talk to me," he said steadily to the pilot, his voice carrying clearly through the speakers. "What exactly are you feeling?" "In the controls," the pilot's voice crackled back, tension evident even through the static. "Increasing vibration in the starboard engine, irregular power output. Primary systems are showing green, but something's not right." Sarah watched as James closed his eyes briefly, visualizing the aircraft's systems. "When did you first notice the vibration pattern change?" "About 20 minutes ago, just after we hit some light turbulence." James's eyes snapped open. "Lisa," he called to his protégé, "pull up the maintenance records from their last service check. Focus on the starboard engine mount assembly." The young engineer's fingers flew across her keyboard, bringing up the requested documentation. James studied the records intently, his expression growing focused. "Captain," he said into the comm, "I need you to do something unconventional. Reduce power to 70% on both engines, then gradually increase starboard thrust while maintaining current altitude." "Tell me exactly what you feel." Sarah stepped closer, understanding dawning on her face. She'd seen this before in one of her father's old logbooks, a similar issue with an engine mount that all the modern diagnostics had missed. The pilot acknowledged, and the hangar fell silent as they waited. Seconds stretched like hours until his voice returned. "Vibration pattern changed. There's a rhythmic fluctuation now, especially when I increase power." James nodded, as if confirming something. "You've got a hairline crack in the forward engine mount. The turbulence you hit probably widened it enough to affect the engine's harmony. Your instruments aren't showing it because the mount is still technically within tolerance, but it's going to get worse." The tension in the hangar ratcheted up another notch. A failing engine mount at cruise altitude was every pilot's nightmare. "Options?" Sarah asked quietly, though she already knew they were limited. James turned to address both her and the pilot. "You need to get that aircraft on the ground, but a standard descent profile would put too much stress on that mount." He paused, thinking. "There's a procedure we used in the Air Force for similar situations. It's not in any civilian manual, but it will work. Sarah met his eyes, reading the certainty there. Without hesitation, she nodded. Do it. For the next 45 minutes, James talked the pilot through a carefully choreographed descent, adjusting power settings and attitudes to minimize stress on the weakened mount. The entire hangar held its breath, watching as the aircraft's altitude slowly decreased. When the Gulfstream finally touched down safely at a nearby airport, the relief in the hangar was palpable. The medical team would make their delivery on time, thanks to a backup aircraft already being dispatched. As the emergency response team began to disperse, Sarah observed James examining the real-time images being sent from the landing site. The crack he'd diagnosed was exactly where he'd predicted, visible only now that they knew precisely where to look. "You saved lives today," she said softly, joining him at the display. James shook his head slightly. "Just did what needed doing. The real hero is that pilot, executing an unfamiliar procedure under that kind of pressure." "You knew exactly what was wrong," Sarah pressed. "How?" "The vibration pattern the pilot described. I'd seen it before, in Afghanistan. Different aircraft, same problem. Sometimes the old lessons are the most valuable." Their eyes met, and Sarah felt that now familiar surge of connection. This man, who could diagnose an aircraft problem from halfway across the country, who could remain calm in the face of potential disaster, who always deflected praise to others, he embodied everything she valued about true expertise. The morning sun was streaming through the hangar windows now, catching the silver in James's hair as he continued studying the damage reports. Sarah found herself watching him, seeing not just the maintenance expert, but the man himself, dedicated, humble, and somehow becoming essential to more than just Pacific Aerospace's operations. "The media will want a statement," she said finally, reluctant to break the moment, but aware of her responsibilities. James looked up, a slight smile touching his lips. "Tell them the truth, that it was a team effort, that sometimes the old ways and the new need to work together." Sarah nodded, understanding he meant more than just aircraft maintenance. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Coffee later. I wouldn't miss it," he replied, their daily ritual now carrying deeper meaning after the morning's events. The emergency lights had been dimmed, but something remained illuminated between them. A trust and understanding that went far beyond their professional roles. In averting this crisis, they had revealed something to each other, and perhaps to themselves, about the real nature of their growing connection. The article appeared in the business section of the morning paper. Pacific Aerospace, CEOs rise from shop girl to billionaire, the real story behind Sarah Mitchell's empire. James found it on his desk when he arrived, clearly placed there by someone who wanted him to see it. The piece was ostensibly flattering, chronicling Sarah's journey from her father's repair shop to corporate success. But beneath the surface, praise lay carefully crafted barbs, hints about convenient timing in acquiring contracts, suggestions about her close relationships with key industry figures, subtle implications about how a young woman had risen so quickly in a male-dominated field. James's jaw tightened as he read. He knew Sarah's story, the real story, from their many late-night conversations, the years of study, the double shifts at her father's shop, the nights spent learning every aircraft system by heart. The article's insinuations were not just wrong, they were cruel. He found her in her office, standing at the windows, with rigid posture that betrayed her tension. A copy of the paper lay on her desk, its pages crumpled at the edges where she'd gripped them too tightly. "I suppose you've seen it," she said without turning, her voice carefully controlled. "Sarah, it's nothing new," she cut him off, still facing the window. "There's always someone ready to question how I got here, to hint that I couldn't possibly have earned it all on merit alone." James moved closer, noting the slight tremor in her hands. "Anyone who's worked with you knows the truth." She turned then, and the vulnerability in her eyes caught him off guard. Do they? Or do they see what that article suggests? A woman who must have taken shortcuts, made compromises, used her looks instead of her skills. I see someone who rebuilt an entire aircraft electrical system by herself at 19, James said quietly. Someone who can diagnose engine problems by sound alone. Someone who remembers every lesson her father taught her about integrity in this business. Sarah's carefully maintained composure wavered. Dad always said the work would speak for itself. That if I just focused on doing things right, people would recognize the truth. She gave a bitter laugh. He was an optimist. He was right, James countered. Look at what you've built here. Not just the company, but the culture of excellence, the emphasis on real expertise over shortcuts. Sometimes I wonder, she began, then stopped herself. Wonder what? If it's worth it, the constant scrutiny, the never-ending need to prove myself. Even after all these years, one hint of impropriety and people are ready to believe the worst. James stepped closer, close enough to see the unshed tears she was fighting back. Tell me about the contract they mentioned in the article. The one they implied you got through personal connections. Sarah tensed, but something in his tone made her answer. It was my first major deal after Dad died. The client was another small repair shop owner who'd known him. He trusted Dad's judgment about aircraft maintenance, and he trusted that Dad had taught me well. That trust helped me land the contract, yes, but we delivered excellence, just like Dad always insisted we must. That's not a scandal, Sarah. That's legacy. Your father built a reputation for integrity, and you honored it. Anyone who suggests otherwise, doesn't matter what they suggest, she interrupted, her professional mask slipping back into place. I have a company to run. James watched her retreat behind her walls, understanding too well the impulse to guard a wounded heart. My last deployment, he said suddenly. I lost 3 good friends when a transport went down. The investigation cleared me. The maintenance was perfect, but I still questioned everything. Wondered if I'd missed something so subtle that even the inspection couldn't catch it. Sarah turned back to him, hearing the pain still present in his voice. The doubt, he continued, it eats at you, makes you question your own expertise, your right to keep doing the work. But eventually I realized something. Those doubts were proof that I cared enough to always strive for better, just like your father taught you. Their eyes met, and in that moment they recognized in each other the same deep understanding of what it meant to carry the weight of others' trust, others' lives in their hands. The article, James said softly, it's wrong, and anyone who matters knows it's wrong. Sarah's posture softened slightly. When did you get so wise? Not wisdom, just experience with how much words can hurt, and how important it is to hear the truth from someone who understands. She nodded, turning back to the window, but with less tension now. Stay for a while? She asked quietly. I could use the company of someone who understands. James settled into one of her office chairs, his presence offering silent support. They remained there as the morning sun climbed higher, 2 people who had learned that sharing pain could sometimes be the first step toward healing it. The crumpled newspaper lay forgotten on her desk, its power to wound diminished by the simple act of being seen and understood by someone who knew the real story, who recognized the true measure of a person's worth, not in headlines, but in the quiet dedication to doing things right. The invitation sat on James's desk, elegant in its simplicity, a handwritten note on Pacific Aerospace letterhead. Dinner at my house tonight? There's something I'd like to discuss away from office walls. Sarah, his fingers traced the familiar curves of her handwriting, so different from her usual digital communications. The day passed in a blur of maintenance checks and training sessions, but his mind kept returning to the note. Their relationship had been evolving steadily since the crisis with the Gulfstream, their daily coffee meetings growing longer, their conversations deeper. But this felt different, a deliberate step beyond the careful boundaries they'd maintained. Sarah's home proved to be surprisingly modest for a CEO, a renovated craftsman-style house with a view of the city lights. She answered the door, dressed casually in slacks and a soft blue sweater, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her at the office. "I hope you like Italian," she said, leading him through to a warm, inviting kitchen where the aroma of herbs and garlic filled the air. Dad's old recipe for lasagna. He used to say good food made any conversation better. Susan said the same thing, James replied, accepting the glass of wine she offered. She'd cook these elaborate meals whenever we needed to talk about something important. Sarah's eyes met his over her wine glass. "Is that what this feels like? Something important? You tell me," he said gently. "Your invitation." She moved to check the oven, using the moment to gather her thoughts. "The board is pushing for expansion. New facilities, bigger contracts. We're at a crossroads, and I find myself wanting your perspective. Not just as head of fleet maintenance, but as someone who understands," James finished for her. "Yes." She turned back to face him. "Though that's not the only reason I asked you here tonight." The timer chimed before she could continue, and they fell into an easy rhythm of serving dinner and settling at her dining room table. Through the window, the city sparkled below them, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt far removed from their professional roles. "This is amazing," James said after tasting the lasagna. "Your father taught you well." "He taught me everything important," Sarah replied softly, "including how to recognize when someone comes into your life who shares your values, your understanding of what really matters." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. James set down his fork, meeting her gaze directly. "Sarah, I know there are complications," she continued. "Professional boundaries, corporate politics, what people might say. But after that article, after seeing how you understood without me having to explain, I realized something had changed between us." "It changed long before that," James admitted. "Those late nights in the hangar, talking about more than just aircraft maintenance. Your coffee appearing on my desk exactly when I needed it. The way you've welcomed Katie into the company like family." "She is family," Sarah said simply. "Or at least that's how I've come to think of her, of both of you." James sat back, taking in the woman before him. Brilliant, successful, yet somehow as lonely as he had been before coming to Pacific Aerospace. "When Susan died," he said carefully, "I thought that part of my life was over. Focused everything on Katie, on just getting through each day. Wasn't looking for this." "Neither was I," Sarah replied. "Built all these walls around myself, thought they were necessary to succeed in this industry. Then you walked into my hangar and started quietly dismantling them, just like you diagnosed that Gulfstream, seeing past the surface to what really mattered." Their eyes met across the table, years of shared experiences and understanding flowing between them. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere in the distance, a plane's running lights blinked across the sky. "So where does this leave us?" James asked softly. Sarah stood, moving to the window. "I've spent my whole life making safe, calculated decisions, building this company, protecting my position, maintaining appropriate distances. But Dad used to say something else too, that sometimes the riskiest choice on paper is the safest choice for your heart." James joined her at the window, close enough to feel her presence, but not quite touching. "And what does your heart say?" She turned to face him, vulnerability and strength mingling in her expression. "That some things are worth the risk. That walls don't just keep pain out, they keep joy away too. That maybe it's time to trust in something beyond balance sheets and board approvals." "Sarah," he said softly, her name carrying all the meaning. They'd been dancing around for months. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I'm not asking for anything to change at work. We've both worked too hard to build what we have there. But here, away from the office, we can just be ourselves," James finished, understanding perfectly. The city lights continued to twinkle below them, but neither was watching anymore. In that moment, they were just a man and a woman who had found in each other something unexpected and precious. A second chance at the kind of connection they'd both thought was behind them. The anonymous letter appeared in James's morning mail, buried between maintenance reports and certification paperwork. Plain white envelope, no return address, typed with mechanical precision. Your relationship with Ms. Mitchell compromises the integrity of Pacific Aerospace. Step down voluntarily or evidence of impropriety will be presented to the board. James sat at his desk, reading the words again, as morning sunlight streamed through his office window. The threat was clear, but it wasn't fear he felt. It was a familiar calm, the same steady focus that had served him through countless military crises. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Tom Chen entered, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, there's something you should know. Mr. Davidson has been asking questions about your after-hours meetings with Ms. Mitchell, the kind of questions that suggest..." "That suggest what, Tom?" James's voice was quiet but firm. "That your position here might be influenced by personal factors." Tom shifted nervously. He's been reviewing security footage, maintenance logs, trying to find discrepancies. James nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. "Thank you for telling me, Tom. How many others has he approached?" "Most of the senior team. But, sir..." Tom straightened, finding his resolve. "We all see what you've done here. How you've transformed our maintenance program. Whatever Davidson's implying, we know the truth." After Tom left, James studied the anonymous letter again. The timing wasn't coincidental. The board's annual review was approaching, and Sarah's expansion plans would require unanimous approval. A scandal involving the CEO and her head of fleet maintenance would derail everything. He reached for his phone to call Sarah, then stopped. She was in Singapore, finalizing details for the new Asian facility. This news could wait until she returned. For now, he had work to do. Throughout the day, James maintained his usual routine, training sessions, inspections, meetings with his team. But he paid closer attention to the undercurrents of conversation, the subtle shifts in attitude when certain names were mentioned. Lisa Chen caught up with him between hangars. "Uncle Richard's been asking about you," she said without preamble. At his raised eyebrow, she added, "Yes, everyone knows he's my uncle. They also know I got this job on merit, thanks to your training program." "Davidson's your uncle?" James, who kept his voice neutral. "Unfortunately, he's always resented Sarah's success, especially since she was Dad's choice to lead the company, not him." Lisa's expression hardened. "He's trying to use me to gather information about you and Sarah. He doesn't know I've already told her everything." James absorbed this new information carefully. "Your loyalty to Pacific Aerospace does you credit, Lisa. My loyalty is to good people doing good work," she corrected. "You and Sarah rebuilt this maintenance division into something we're all proud of. Uncle Richard's just angry because he can't control it anymore." That evening, as James reviewed the day's events in his office, Sarah called. Even through the video link, he could see the tension in her face. "Davidson's made his move," she said without preamble. "Anonymous letters to board members suggesting inappropriate influence in your appointment. Hints about misuse of company resources for personal meetings." "I received a letter too," James admitted. "Sarah, if my presence is causing problems, don't." "You dare," she interrupted. "This isn't about us, James. It's about control. Davidson's never forgiven me for being chosen as CEO over him. He's using our relationship as leverage to challenge my expansion plans." James studied her face on the screen, seeing the familiar determination in her eyes. "What do you need from me?" "Just keep doing your job excellently, as you always have." "I'm cutting my trip short. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll face this together." After they disconnected, James sat in his darkened office thinking. Through the window, he could see lights still on in various hangars, his team working late as usual. Their dedication wasn't born from corporate politics or fear. It came from the culture of excellence he and Sarah had built together. The anonymous letter lay on his desk, its threat seeming smaller now. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that true strength wasn't about avoiding attacks, but about standing firm in your convictions. Sarah understood that too. It was one of the many things that had drawn them together. He reached for his phone again, this time calling Katie. His daughter deserved to hear about the situation from him, not through company gossip. Her response was immediate and unwavering. "Dad, you and Sarah are the best things that have happened to Pacific Aerospace. Don't let anyone tell you different." As night settled over the facility, James made his final rounds, checking on the evening shift. In each hangar, he was met with nods of respect and support from his team. They knew his worth, just as he knew theirs. Whatever Davidson was planning, he had underestimated the strength of the bonds formed through shared purpose and mutual respect. Tomorrow, Sarah would return, and they would face this challenge together. For now, James had aircraft to maintain, students to teach, and a legacy of excellence to uphold. No anonymous letter could threaten that. The social media storm broke just as Sarah's plane touched down from Singapore. A grainy security camera photo of their dinner at her house had somehow leaked online, accompanied by speculation about favoritism and corporate impropriety. By the time she reached the office, Pacific Aerospace scandal was trending. James was waiting in her office, his tablet displaying the viral posts that were multiplying across platforms. "Welcome home," he said softly, the warmth in his voice a contrast to the chaos swirling around them. Sarah dropped her travel bag and moved to the window, her usual view of the hangars now partially blocked by news vans gathering at the facility's entrance. "Davidson's work, I assume." The photo came from his office's security system, James confirmed. "Lisa did some digging. He's been planning this for weeks." "Of course he has." Sarah turned back to face him, her expression determined. "The board's demanding an emergency meeting this afternoon. Davidson's probably expecting me to deny everything, to claim the photo's been misinterpreted." "What are you planning instead?" A slight smile touched her lips. "The truth. Novel concept in corporate politics, isn't it?" Before James could respond, Sarah's assistant hurried in. "Ma'am, there's something you should see. The maintenance team... Well, look." She pulled up a live feed from the hangars on the office screens. Every available surface had been decorated with hand-drawn signs. "Excellence has no gender. Leadership is about skills, not status. We stand with Sarah and James." The entire maintenance crew was gathered, wearing their uniforms with pride. "They organized it overnight," the assistant explained. "And it's not just maintenance. Engineering, operations, even accounting, they're all showing support." Sarah's eyes glistened as she watched more employees joining the gathering. James moved to stand beside her, close enough for support, but maintaining professional distance. "Your people know who you are," he said quietly. "Both of us." The board meeting that afternoon crackled with tension. Davidson sat with a satisfied smile, clearly expecting his carefully orchestrated scandal to achieve its intended effect. But as Sarah took her place at the head of the table, her calm demeanor gave him his first moment of doubt. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I'm sure you've all seen the photo circulating online. Rather than waste time with denials or explanations, let me be direct. Yes, James Harrison and I have developed a personal relationship. Yes, it began after I hired him based solely on his exceptional qualifications and demonstrated expertise." She paused, making eye contact with each board member. "But if you're looking for a scandal, you're going to be disappointed. What you'll find instead is a commitment to excellence that has transformed our maintenance division, improved our safety ratings, and positioned us for global expansion." The boardroom doors opened, and Lisa Chen entered, carrying a thick folder. "With your permission," she addressed the board, "I'd like to present some relevant data." For the next hour, Lisa walked the board through detailed statistics, maintenance efficiency improvements, training program successes, cost savings, and safety innovations. Every metric showed clear improvement since James had joined the company. "And one more thing," Lisa added, turning to Davidson. "Uncle Richard, did you really think I wouldn't recognize your involvement in leaking that photo? The same security system you had installed in your office last month." Davidson's face reddened as other board members turned to stare at him. "This is irrelevant," he blustered. "The issue is clear impropriety. The issue Sarah cut in, is whether Pacific Aerospace values genuine expertise and innovation over outdated corporate politics. James Harrison has earned his position through merit and demonstrated leadership. Our relationship developed naturally through shared values and mutual respect. If anyone sees that as a scandal, perhaps they should question their own priorities. Outside, the gathering of employees had grown larger. News cameras caught images of unified teams, professional excellence on display rather than salacious scandal. Several military veterans who worked in various departments had donned their old service pins in support of James. When Sarah and James finally left the board meeting hours later, they found Katie waiting in Sarah's office. She hugged her father fiercely, then turned to embrace Sarah with equal warmth. The engineering department's compiled testimonials from every intern and trainee you've mentored, she told them. They're releasing them online now, real stories, about real leadership, not gossip and innuendo. Sarah squeezed Katie's hand gratefully, then moved to her desk where another stack of messages waited. Messages of support were pouring in from clients, industry partners, and even competitors who recognized the value of experience over politics. "Well," James said quietly, "this isn't quite how I planned to go public with our relationship." Sarah laughed softly, some of the day's tension finally easing. "No? Not fond of trending hashtags and news vans? I prefer aircraft maintenance, it's more straightforward." Their eyes met across the office, and in that moment they knew they'd weathered the worst of the storm. Their relationship had been thrust into the spotlight, but it had emerged stronger, supported by the foundation of respect and excellence they'd built together. Sarah sat in her father's old leather chair, now restored and placed in her home office, reviewing the document before her. The resignation letter was already drafted, her signature line waiting at the bottom. After the media storm, it seemed like the simplest solution. Step down, protect the company from further controversy, let the expansion plans proceed without the complication of her personal life overshadowing them. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. James entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the contemplative expression she'd come to know so well. "Katie said you might be here," he said, setting her coffee beside her. "In your thinking chair." Sarah smiled softly. Dad always said his best decisions came from this chair. Something about the worn leather helping wisdom sink in. "And what wisdom is it sharing tonight?" She handed him the resignation letter. James read it carefully, his expression unchanging until he reached the end. Then he placed it back on her desk and pulled up another chair beside her. "This isn't you, Sarah," he said quietly. "Running isn't your style." "It's not running," she argued. "It's protecting everything we've built, the expansion plans, the training programs, the future of Pacific Aerospace. It's all bigger than just me." "Exactly," James agreed. "It's bigger than you, which is precisely why you can't step down. This company isn't just about aircraft maintenance or corporate expansion. It's about the values you've instilled. Excellence, integrity, real expertise. Over politics." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Remember what you told the board about valuing genuine expertise and innovation over outdated corporate politics. That wasn't just about us. It was about the future of aviation maintenance itself." Sarah squeezed his hand, remembering her father's words about tough decisions. "There might be another way," she said slowly. "I've been thinking about restructuring the company anyway, creating separate divisions with more autonomous leadership." James listened as she outlined her vision. Maintenance and training as one division, research and development as another, with corporate operations providing oversight rather than direct control. "It would create clear professional boundaries," she explained, "while maintaining the integration that makes us effective." "And us?" James asked softly. "We'd be setting the example we've always preached, that personal relationships don't negate professional excellence, that you can honor both heart and duty." She stood, moving to the window where the city lights twinkled below. James joined her, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching a plane's landing lights trace a path across the night sky. "When Susan died," James said finally, "I thought that chapter of my life was closed, focused everything on Katie, on just surviving. Never expected to find someone who understood both the professional and the personal parts of who I am." Sarah turned to face him. "When Dad died, I threw myself into building this company, thinking success would be enough. But he always said a life without connection was like an aircraft without a soul, technically functional but missing its purpose." James smiled at the aviation metaphor. He was right, just like he was right about you leading this company. Reaching for the resignation letter, he carefully tore it in half. "Pacific Aerospace needs you, Sarah. Not just as a CEO, but as someone who understands that excellence and humanity aren't mutually exclusive." She watched the torn pieces fall into the wastebasket, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "We'll need to present the restructuring plan to the board. Davidson won't make it easy." "No," James agreed, "but this time we'll be ready. We have something he never understood, the loyalty of people who believe in doing things right." Sarah moved back to her father's chair, pulling out fresh paper. "Help me work this out. We need to make sure the new structure serves both the company's growth and its soul." They spent the next few hours planning, their coffee growing cold as they mapped out a future that would honor both their professional integrity and personal connection. The leather chair seemed to embrace their effort, as if her father's wisdom was indeed helping guide their path. As midnight approached, Sarah looked at their work with satisfaction. The restructuring plan was solid, addressing both corporate governance and practical operations. It would allow them to maintain their relationship, while ensuring the company's continued excellence. "This feels right," she said, shuffling the papers into order, "like something Dad would approve of." James nodded, understanding completely. Susan, too. She always said life was too short to choose between love and purpose when you could honor both. Their eyes met in the soft lamplight, and Sarah saw in James's face the same certainty she felt. They weren't just saving their relationship or the company. They were creating something new, a model of leadership that recognized the full humanity of its people. "Tomorrow will be interesting," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "Tomorrow's always interesting with you," James replied, helping her gather their notes. "That's part of why I love you." The words slipped out naturally, without ceremony or hesitation. Sarah's hands stilled on the papers, her heart catching at the simple truth in his voice. "I love you too," she said softly, the words feeling as right as every decision they'd made that night. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows of the newly renovated Craftsman house as Sarah and James stood in the empty living room, a set of freshly signed papers on the coffee table between them. The joint property deed represented more than just a shared address. It was a testament to how far they'd come since that first meeting in the hangar. "Katie's already planning how to arrange her room for when she's home from college," James said, watching Sarah as she walked through what would soon be their shared space, "though I think she's more excited about having access to your engineering library." Sarah smiled, running her hand along the built-in bookshelf that would soon hold both their collections, her technical manuals beside his military memorabilia, their histories merging like their lives. "She's presenting her internship project. Next week, you know. The whole engineering department is talking about her innovative approach to maintenance diagnostics." "I wonder where she got that from," James mused, thinking of how Katie had combined his practical experience with Sarah's technological expertise in her research. The sound of cars pulling up outside drew their attention. Through the front window, they could see their team arriving, not as employees today, but as family. The housewarming gathering had been Tom's idea, a way to celebrate not just their move, but the success of Pacific Aerospace's restructuring. Lisa was the first through the door, carrying a plant and wearing a broad smile. "Uncle Richard, finally, resigned from the board," she announced without preamble. "Said something about changing times, requiring changing leadership." Sarah and James exchanged knowing looks. The past 6 months had proved their restructuring plan more successful than even they had hoped. With maintenance and training now a separate division under James's leadership and corporate operations streamlined under Sarah's guidance, the company had found a new balance between innovation and tradition. The house filled quickly with voices and laughter. Tom and his team had brought food, the engineering department arrived with books for the library, and Katie's fellow interns presented a framed photo of the entire maintenance crew standing proudly in front of their newest aircraft. "Remember when they thought our relationship would compromise the company?" Sarah murmured to James as they watched their extended family mingle. "Turned out to strengthen it instead," he replied, his arms settling naturally around her waist. "Though I never doubted it would." The afternoon unfolded with the comfortable warmth of people who had become more than colleagues. In the backyard, veteran mechanics shared stories with young engineers, bridging the gap between experience and innovation. Katie moved between groups, equally at ease discussing technical specifications with Sarah's research team and maintenance procedures with her father's crew. As evening approached, Sarah found herself in the kitchen with Lisa, watching through the window as James demonstrated an inspection technique to a group of interested interns. "You know," Lisa said, "Uncle Richard never understood what made Pacific Aerospace special. He thought it was about power and control. But watching you and James, it's about connection, isn't it? Between people, between generations of expertise." Sarah nodded, thinking of her father's old repair shop. "Your uncle saw relationships as weakness, but real strength comes from building bridges between old wisdom and new technology, between art and mind." Outside, Katie had joined her father's demonstration, adding her own insights about integrating traditional inspection methods with modern diagnostic tools. The interns were taking notes, their faces bright with understanding as theory and practice came together seamlessly. Later, as the gathering wound down and their guests began to leave, James found Sarah in what would be their home office, arranging family photos on the desk. Susan's picture sat beside one of Sarah's father, watching over the space where their shared work would continue. "Having second thoughts?" he asked softly, noting her contemplative expression. Sarah turned to him, her eyes clear and certain. "Just the opposite. I was thinking about something Dad used to say about aircraft maintenance, that every inspection was really about trust. Trust in your training, your team, your judgment." "Sounds like a wise man," James said, drawing her close. He was, and he would have loved seeing how we've brought it all together. The company, the family, the future we're building. Through the window, they could see Katie in the backyard, deep in conversation with Lisa about her upcoming graduation. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold that reminded Sarah of that first evening in the hangar when a broken aircraft had brought them together. "You know," James said, following her gaze, "in the Air Force, they taught us that the strongest teams were built on shared values, not just shared goals. Looking at what we've created here, we've built something special," Sarah finished for him, understanding perfectly. "Not just a home or a company, but a legacy of trust and excellence that will outlast us both." The evening light softened around them, and in that moment they were simply a man and woman who had found in each other not just love, but a shared purpose. Their journey had begun with a broken aircraft and a need for true expertise, but it had led them to something far more precious, a future where personal and professional dreams could flourish together, strengthened by the very connection others had once seen as a weakness. The cover of Aviation Weekly featured a striking image: Sarah and James standing together in front of Pacific Aerospace's newest maintenance facility, their professional attire and matching wedding bands catching the sunlight. The headline read, "Love Takes Flight: How Pacific Aerospace Revolutionized Aviation Maintenance Culture." 1 year had passed since their private wedding ceremony in the restored hangar where they first met. Now, sitting in their shared office at home, they were reading the magazine's feature article together, both amused by how their personal story had become an industry talking point. "Listen to this," Sarah said, reading aloud. "The Mitchell-Harrison approach to aviation maintenance has become the new industry standard, combining traditional expertise with cutting-edge innovation. Their revolutionary training program, which pairs experienced veterans with young engineers, is being adopted by major airlines worldwide." James smiled, remembering the skepticism they'd initially faced. They left out the part about how Katie's graduation speech inspired the whole thing. Indeed, their daughter's valedictorian address at her engineering school had captured the essence of what made Pacific Aerospace special. Standing at the podium in her cap and gown, Katie had spoken passionately about bridging generations of expertise, about how her father's practical wisdom and Sarah's innovative vision had shown her the true meaning of excellence. The article continued. Pacific Aerospace's maintenance division, under James Harrison's leadership, has achieved the highest safety ratings in the industry, while CEO Sarah Mitchell's corporate restructuring has become a case study in balanced leadership. But perhaps most remarkable is how their personal relationship has transformed corporate culture, proving that professional excellence and human connection are not mutually exclusive. Sarah set the magazine down, her attention drawn to the framed photos on their office wall. There was Katie at her graduation, flanked by her proud parents. Next to it hung the original front-page story about the Gulfstream repair that had brought them together, and beside that, a group photo of their maintenance team receiving an Industry Innovation Award. "Did you see page 30? James asked, flipping to a familiar face. Lisa's article about modernizing maintenance training. Lisa Chen had become their Director of Training Development, her program combining traditional inspection methods with advanced diagnostic technology. Her uncle Richard, true to form, had tried to take credit for her success at his retirement party. Lisa had simply smiled and thanked him for showing her exactly what kind of leader she didn't want to become. The sound of voices from downstairs interrupted their reading. Katie was home for the weekend, bringing a group of her fellow young engineers for a mentoring session. The program had been her idea, regular gatherings where experienced maintenance crews could share their knowledge with the next generation. "Should we join them?" Sarah asked, hearing the excited discussions about aircraft systems floating up from the living room. James checked his watch. "In a minute. Tom's bringing the team over too. Something about celebrating the new international certification program." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The magazine lay open between them, its glossy pages telling a story that was both personal and professional, yet somehow larger than both. "You know what this reminds me of?" Sarah said finally, gesturing to the article. "That first night in my office, when you said sometimes the old ways and the new need to work together." "I was talking about aircraft maintenance," James replied with a gentle smile. "Were you? Because I think you were talking about something bigger, about how the best futures are built on foundations of experience, about how real connection makes everything stronger." From downstairs came the sound of Katie explaining a complex maintenance procedure, her voice carrying the same passion for excellence that had brought her parents together. They could hear Tom adding his practical insights and Lisa discussing ways to integrate new technology with traditional methods. James stood, offering his hand to Sarah. "Shall we go down? Sounds like they're getting to the good part." Sarah took his hand, feeling the familiar warmth of connection that had changed both their lives. "They're all good parts now," she said softly. As they descended the stairs to join their extended family of aviation professionals, the magazine remained open on their desk, its final paragraph catching the afternoon light. In an industry often divided between tradition and innovation, Sarah Mitchell and James Harrison have proven that the strongest bonds are forged through mutual respect and shared values. Their story is not just about two people finding love in an unexpected place. It's about the power of genuine expertise, the importance of bridging generational wisdom, and the enduring truth that excellence in both life and aviation is built on a foundation of trust, understanding, and the courage to let your heart guide you to new heights. The sounds of laughter and passionate discussion filled their home, a testament to the community they had built together. In the living room, surrounded by the next generation of aviation professionals, they would continue sharing their knowledge, their experience, and their unwavering belief that the best maintenance of all, whether of aircraft or relationships, came from a perfect balance of head and heart.